I think there's some frustration from all of our guys, to be fair. Look, he's a young guy, young man learning the caper. He's got high standards, high expectations. So, yeah, there's some frustration out there, there's no doubt. But as I said, I don't think it's just limited to him.
The number one draft pick got some problems, North Melbourne. 2-week ban now on the back of that. He had a frustrating day yesterday. He was venting with players like Todd Goldstein. Lordo, you watched it closely. What do you make of it?
Well, I think maybe for the first part of his career, they've sort of treated him with kid gloves in a sense because they don't want to upset Jason Horne-Francis. He's number one draft pick, put contract talks off till the end of the year or whatever. But maybe it's time to go the other way and say to him, the tail can't wag the dog. We'll tell you what you're doing. You've been petulant. You're not defending like you should. And if you didn't get your 2-week suspension, you probably might have gone back to the VFL anyway. So we want to see how you train in the next 2 weeks while you've been suspended and see whether you're worthy of playing in our North Melbourne side the next week. I want to compare him to Sam Walsh. So a guy that gets drafted, number one draft pick, he in his first 11 games won one game as well. Yet Sam Walsh was the hardest trainer and the most respected outside of Cripps by the halfway mark of his first season. That's speaking of people internally. So he started sitting in team meetings and saying, we've got to do this better, guys. On the training track, he'd stop a drill and say, this just isn't good enough. But no one said, who are you to say that? Because they respected him straight away for the way he was carrying himself. On field, he would have been frustrated, but does he show it? He's only about the team, Sam Walsh. So it's probably an area where you'd say, try and arrange a sit-down with Sam Walsh. I'm sure he'd be good enough to do it and see what they can salvage. Because if he doesn't improve...
That seems the disconnect, doesn't it? He's got a lot to say,
yeah,
and yet he hasn't won everyone over behind the scenes.
Yeah, and you're not going to respect what he's saying, Hutchie, because he's not living and breathing it. And it's got to that point where if he's still carrying on like this towards the end of the year, I reckon his worth might be less by the end of next year. So that's where I'd seriously consider letting him go. Yeah. Because he's a distraction.
And he's got to be careful. So the dilemma for him now is he seems to be, and other clubs believe he's making noises that he wants to go and return home to South Australia. But the clubs in South Australia are thinking, well, we're going to have to pay him $800,000. So say Adelaide, for example, they're going to have to pay him more than Rory Laird earns. So to him to walk in after acting like that, how do you go to Rory Laird and say, this guy's going to earn more than you? And what does it do to the culture? So I believe Jason Horne-Francis is going to be an excellent player. He's got attributes, highly competitive, tough, courageous, really skillful. I think he's going to get there and he will get there. But it's a big second half of the year for him with the way that he conducts himself.
And they've headed off to a camp today too, a one-night overnight camp led by the leadership team, the Kangaroos. They need more leaders across the board though, don't they?
They do. That's where I want to talk about the strength and how they've handled him. Now it's time for, not ripping him to shreds, but it's time for these guys to say, you know what, we're not going to cop this anymore, Jason.
I guess the counter to that is, and this is going to sound, who right now in their current form is he looking up to there?
Well, certainly Jack's fighting for his career. I think Jai Simpkin is playing good football. Luke McDonald, I thought Luke tried his backside off on Toby Green yesterday. Unfortunately, what's going on with Ben Cunnington and his health, because he's a quiet guy, Ben, but he earns a lot of respect.
And Larky and Core have been poor.
And Jack is heart and soul and tries so hard, and he's getting banged up again yesterday, but ultimately his numbers are so low and they don't really seem to know where to play him or how to deal with him.
I think clubs are too scared to make hard captaincy decisions when they need to. So Dyson Heppel is another example at Essendon. He shouldn't have been the captain this year. Jack Zeeble is the same, and it's a big decision for clubs to get right, and clearly they didn't get that right at North.
Jason Horne-Francis is one problem, and we see Luke McDonald and Todd Goldstein today have to come out and be interviewed about him and answer questions about him, as did the coach David Noble. But is he distracting from the real issue, which is the performance of the coach?
And the losses are adding up. In fact, at the same point, he's in a worse spot than Mark Neild was at Melbourne. Let's look at the comparison. It's 5 wins and 29 losses for Noble at the same period versus 5 wins and 28. And there's a lot in common with the two situations and the two kind of list builds and demographics at the time. How much trouble's he in, Carrick, do you think?
Oh, I think he's in real trouble. I mean, it's just so hard to come back from this. And it's not just losses, but it's big losses. It's not like you're seeing fighting performances. And this is, I keep saying, an under-resourced football club, an understaffed football club. I feel like there are a few people in footy who aren't in the right roles. And I just think that in the end...
Do you think it's time?
I'm not saying they should sack him this week, but
Would you give him another 8 weeks, 9 weeks? Or
I very much doubt. He won't be there next year.
Have you seen enough?
I don't believe. I don't believe that David Noble was the right choice. No, I
Do you
don't.
think he'll see out the year?
I don't know. But I don't think he'll be there.
And this is why he's in trouble. So there could have been many clips of this, but so look at the breakdown of structure at stoppage. All of those players are on one side of the stoppage, which allows the Giants to do this. They get it on the side clearly where all the numbers are, and they flood that area. The run comes from coming off half back from a half forward, and they transition the ball with absolute ease. That is an easy issue to fix. You've just got to balance the stoppage, but they break down continually around these areas, and it's across the board. So Stephen Coniglio, he kicked 3. Another walking goal there. Forward stoppage should be the hardest position from the ground to score in. Once again, watch Coniglio just waltz out the front of this stoppage with no pressure coming towards him. There's another goal from stoppage for the Giants. Easily mark inside 50 or free kick against Hayden. And then this is the other breakdown, defensive transition. You should be able to stop this from deep inside your defensive half. This just shouldn't happen unopposed, and the ability to transition the ball. So that's why David Noble is in trouble. That's not to do with anything other than a breakdown of structure.